Hey, hello, everybody. This is Frank. It is July 14th, 1 p.m. Eastern Seaboard. It is sunny as heck, so that's all I can tell you. This is not a filter. And we are going to do the State of the Strait podcast today, and we will have other news as it occurs later on. Uh, this will be for the period ending today, the 14th. And we're going to start to examine the developments in and around the Strait of Hormuz because this is an entirely different thing than the usual slugfest, bomb them into the ground kind of event. We're starting to see so many more evolutions in warfare and diplomacy that most people aren't even talking about. So it's not simply a perspective of military operation, but through the interaction of the shipping, the insurance, the energy markets, finance, and logistics. All these things play a hand in it. And like I had said to somebody before the other day, they would say, "Oh, we're going to have these." We had an energy cost spike in the last couple of days for a very significant reason, but the earlier missiles meant nothing if you had followed the stock market. Okay, so we're going to just get right into what's going on at this point, which is pretty much what is going to be the price of passage for the Strait of Hormuz. During the past 7 days, the Strait has entered a new phase. We have Iran resumed attacks on commercial shipping, no shock there, but with some renewed vigor. I think all this is catalyst following the, not all of this, can't say that, somebody will complain. The catalyst, of course, is the Ayatollah Khamenei's funeral and the IRGC having to try to show that they still have a set to get out there and, slug it out with the White Devils. And that is being shown more and more often in this commercial attacks repeating themselves now. The United States, of course, repeatedly attacked them with precision airstrikes. We do not carpet bomb, contrary to popular belief. And Iran expended their retaliation across the Gulf into other Arab states who are little a allies of the United States. And that's going to bring on some other things. So President Trump announced the reinstatement of the blockade against the Iranian ports and proposed a 20% charge on cargo receiving American protection through the Strait. Perhaps the biggest story wasn't the missiles, it was going to be the confidence issue, is what we're talking about. Because when you are dealing with maritime commerce, and you will see this at G Captain and what's going on with shipping, Sal Cagliani or whatever his name is, and all those other guys, shipping and maritime commerce is about confidence. Confidence is every bit as important as naval power. And if you only followed the headlines this week, you are probably coming away believing that the Strait of Hormuz has been completely closed. Okay, that isn't what happened. Commercial traffic had continued the entire time, but it continued at dramatically reduced levels. Ships turned around, the LNG carriers especially accumulated outside of Qatar. Some vessels went dark by switching off their AIS transmitters. Ship to ship transfers increased off of Oman. Traffic reportedly fell from roughly 30 to 40 transits a day down to 10. And that distinction is important as well. Iran did not physically control the strait. Instead, Iran increased the perceived risk of using it. And that is a difference, but it's sort of, you say tomato, I say tomato in some senses. And it may sound like a small difference, but strategically, it is an enormous difference. One of the central themes of the doctrine that we worked up, the Blue Web Doctrine, is that the wars at sea are increasingly decided by commercial behavior rather than by naval declarations. And you should think about that more and more as we go along. This week proved that point again. War risk insurance premiums continued climbing. Some underwriters reportedly advised owners not to enter the Gulf at all. And notice what we had happen. No admiral ordered shipping to stop. No international authority officially closed the waterway. Instead, you had the insurance companies, the ship holders, the charterers deciding the financial risk had become too great. That is a different form of blockade, not one enforced by warships, but enforced by economics. Okay. So, like I said, there's a whole thing going on there. The biggest strategic development this week may not have been around or another round of American airstrikes. It may have been Washington's announcement of a renewed blockade together with a proposed 20% passage charge. And that has people screaming because everybody will say this is Washington's war. Why is everybody paying for it, right? So whether the proposal ultimately survives in its current form isn't exactly the most important question. The strategic message is. So for decades, the United States largely treated maritime security as a public good. Now here you have Washington appears to be saying something different. If America provides the security, if America keeps the sea lanes open, then perhaps those benefiting from that protection should help bear its costs. And that represents a significant evolution in maritime thinking. Security is increasingly becoming a service. And like I said, you can say what you want. This is a subject in this strait that we have had issues here before. This is not the first time Iran has acted up. People continue to kick the can down the road and hoping something was changing. Well, now things are changing, and sometimes you have to pay the piper, as they will tell you. So Iran has demonstrated that it still possesses the ability to impose costs on people. It has missile strikes, it has drone strikes, it caused casualties. They have been able to disrupt shipping. They increase insurance costs, and they push oil prices higher. Nobody talks about the fact that these are probably broad daylight, 11:30 in the afternoon shots at the ships that they knew were coming. And, children could probably hit these things. This is not a midnight attack. There's a lot that this is not. The fact of the matter is the media will never tell you that because they got to keep the story alive, right? So the missile and drone attacks are causing some casualties. It's increasing the insurance costs. They pushed oil prices higher because in the price of the oil is the expense of having to go through the Strait of Hormuz. That's how it's all going down. When you're seeing these spikes at this time, it just went up. I think it went up to $78. I have the number later on. In that $78 was not that they weren't going to be able to get oil out of the strait. It was that now it's costing something because of the insurances and the potential of being hit with rockets and things like that. So they've been able to do this kind of stuff, and those are meaningful tactical successes. There's a difference between tactics and strategy. Tactics is short term, strategy is long term. But Iran still has not demonstrated any sustained control over the strait itself. Instead, Tehran continues using what has become a pretty familiar model. And we saw this in the Israel Hamas, Israel Hezbollah, Israel, whoever the hell the Iranians are paying that week war. It's a tit for tat kind of thing. So Tehran has taxed commercial shipping. They declare authority over the waterway. They threaten regional states to go along with it. They increase uncertainty, which raises economic costs. And it's a strategy built around disruption rather than permanent control. The United States, on the other hand, appears to have been evolving its strategic overall strategy. And then, of course, tactically, we've seen a lot of changes go on too. The military strikes remain important, but they are increasingly being integrated with sanctions. We now have the blockade again, okay, with maritime security. And now perhaps the economic participation by others of protecting shipping routes. That combination is something different. It is no longer simply sea control, it's moving towards trade control. And this is a much broader strategic concept. One of the most revealing indicators this week wasn't found on the battlefield, it was found in the oil market. Brent crude climbed into the mid 80s. WTI approached $80 per barrel. That's the American side of that. Yet traders weren't pricing the destruction of Gulf oil production. As I said, they were pricing the transportation risks. They are pricing the additional insurances the carrier has to carry. And that is an important distinction. The market repeatedly showed that it was less concerned about the explosions than about whether the cargoes could actually leave the Gulf. Oil in the ground has very little value if it cannot reach customers. And transportation means everything. Now, for the LNG side, that may become the bigger story. Liquefied natural gas is a special attention because of the way the product is handled. Unlike crude oil, LNG cannot easily be replaced. Qatar remains one of the world's largest LNG supporters because they have the largest. I think they have either they or Iran has the largest proven reserve of natural gas. It becomes liquefied. Sorry about that. If carriers cannot leave Ras Laffan effectively or efficiently, Europe and Asia could feel some effects pretty quickly on that one. This is an area we're going to continue to monitor closely over the coming weeks because that's going to be a big issue. Iran has struck Qatar recently as well. Uh, Everybody tells you what hits where. The problem that occurs with the level of rabid news that goes on is that although Iran is probably 75% blind, 80% blind, as long as they have access to cable news shows, they will be able to do their bomb damage assessment. They'll be able to do their targeting to some extent. They're kind of just throwing rocks out there, but they are very educated on where the rocks are going. Okay. If they had the ability to really have a command control structure that could fire these missiles, they would have made the thing a graveyard way back when. That should tell you something about what's going on. So my favorite part of this, which I don't hear anybody talking about, is getting very little attention. And if you have Ship Tracker or something, you want to try to spend your time on it, fine. I'm working 3 jobs right now. So it's going to be the Iranian tankers. It is let's say if a meaningful number of Iran's own vessels are outside of the strait while the blockade is on, those ships are now much more than transportation assets because they become floating storage for the Iranians. If you'll recall earlier, they were running out of storage capacity and had filled up pretty much every tanker they had their hands on. Okay. They are also they become an asset that may not be able to return home easily. Okay. Because day one, it was like a track meet getting all the Iranian oil out of the harbor. So tracking the Iranian tanker movements or the dark fleet activities, I'm talking just straight up flag tankers, dark fleet activity and ship to ship transfers may become one of the most important indicators of how effective the blockade ultimately proves to be because I'll probably mention it again because under a blockade situation the last time, they had X amount of empty ships to handle their excess capacity of oil. If those ships are out at sea, the U.S. Navy does not have to, A, let them through the blockade. And if you were a ballsy cat, since we're kind of at war, you'd seize every one of their tankers wherever they are. We sank one of their warships out in Singapore. There's no reason that we can't seize their oil tankers when they're at sea. And we hold them someplace till we decide what we're going to do with them, right? The economic blow, let alone the just storage capacity loss, will be felt very heavily in that time period. That will send off a lot of, the thing is, will that send off a lot of missiles? Good chance it will. Okay. And then one other item that remains surprising unclear, which I don't know what's going on there, but I suspect hijinks. The United States previously announced plans for a United States government-backed maritime insurance program intending to offset the rising commercial war risk premiums, which would have kept the price of oil down. So far, there has been very little public, and I looked in a bunch of places. Anybody who knows where we can look that we can get a good number, please contact us at the site here. So far, there's been very little public information regarding who has adopted the program. We know some people have, they just don't know who they are. How much capacity has actually been committed and or whether it's materially lowering the shipping costs. And the silence there is significant. If commercial confidence is ultimately going to return, insurance prices and things like that, not military strikes alone, will likely determine when normal shipping resumes. So, what are our conclusions for this week? Iran has shown that it can still disrupt commerce. The United States has demonstrated overwhelming military superiority, regardless of what Reuters and Associated Press tell you, but neither of those answers the larger strategic question. Can military dominance be converted into dependable commercial confidence. Ships sail because owners believe they will arrive. You don't put a ship in the ocean just to go out and kill a bunch of sailors, right? Crews believe the voyage is going to be worth making. Banks finance the cargo because it's worth selling at a profit, and insurers accept the risk. So until all four occur together, the strait may be militarily open while remaining commercially constrained but not closed. That is precisely the distinction we continue making here, on the state of the strait. So there are several developments that we are going to be monitoring, and then we'll end with that. Will Washington formally implement the proposed 20% passage charge? Will the blockade begin producing measurable effects on Iranian exports? Do daily Hormuz transit numbers recover? Will insurance premiums begin failing or continue rising? I didn't mean failing, I meant falling, having that day. Can the liquefied natural gas shipments resume normal schedules? And perhaps most importantly, will commercial confidence begin returning? Because ultimately, it's the confidence, not the headlines, that determines whether global trade is going to continue to move. So that's all we have for now. There'll be a link in the description to a recent article I had over at Middle East North African Forum on part of the subject, and the new book, The Blue Web Doctrine, Maritime Strategy for the 21st Century, is now available on Kindle and Amazon if you so desire to purchase it. So that's all we have for now. And otherwise, have a great day. Goodbye.